This podcast is hosted on podhome.fm, the most modern podcast hosting platform. Podhome offers unlimited episodes and podcasts, and unlimited use of Podhome AI, which generates transcripts, clips, chapters, title suggestions, show notes, and much more. And all of that for just $15.99 a month or $185 per year. That's a steal. So go to podhome.fm and start your 30-day trial now. And enjoy the show with Joe.
Transmitting live from the Asylum Studios, deep in the bowels of Southwest Texas, it's the Joe Rooz Show. The show where we talk about anything and everything. Where nothing is sacred, nothing is watered down, and nothing is PC.
Alrighty. Hey folks, it is Tuesday, the 7th of April, 2026. I am Joe Rooz, and it is great to be with you once again, transmitting live at the Asylum, and of course, as always, doing the very best we can to bring you the best quality talk radio we could muster without all the bluster. Welcome to the Joe Rooz Show. All right, well, apologies to start off with, folks. We had a little bit of a technical kerfluffle getting started here tonight, but I think we've got it worked out, and if we don't, well, we'll pull a Caramel Lucas. If you remember that one. We ended up having to cut the show early, and we rescheduled, but that's okay. So worst case scenario, folks, if anything does happen when we can't continue on because of the technical problems, we'll cut it, and we'll wrap up the show, and then we'll reconnect with our guest and bring you a great show. All right. So I hope you guys were able to catch the show last night. We had a great time, great conversation with John David. That was the interview that almost didn't take place, but we're glad that it did, and it was really, really good. Really enjoyed the conversation with him. Incredibly smart guy, had a great background, great history, and looking forward to connecting with him again. We already booked a repeat appearance. He's a glutton for punishment. So he's coming back in May, and we're looking forward to having him there at that time. All right. Well, I want to ask you something. What if people who lived through the Civil War never really understood it? Not the generals, not the politicians, not even the soldiers on the battlefield. Just everyday Americans writing letters home, trying to make sense of a country that was tearing itself apart. And then, after it was all over, one woman, a war widow, wrote a single line that still hits like a punch in the gut. Now that the cruel war is over, I wonder what it all meant. Well, tonight, we're not looking at the Civil War through history books. We're stepping inside it through the voices of the people who lived it in real time. Because maybe really the most important question isn't what happened. It's whether we've learned anything from it. But as always, before we get into the story tonight, we are going to take care of some of our housekeeping stuff. So, folks, if you would, please head over to our website, joerooz.com. That's joerooz.com. And when you get over there, look for the contact section. It's up there in the little pancake in the upper right corner of the website. Open that thing up, open up the web form, send us over a message. Let us know whatever's on your heart, whatever's on your mind, any questions, comments, cares, concerns you might have. Maybe you have a complaint. You shouldn't, but you might. If you do, you can just drop it there in the comment section. Maybe you have a suggestion for a guest. Maybe you have a topic you'd like us to discuss. Let us know what you're thinking. We would love to hear from you guys. And you can do that very easily by using the contact form. But if you're anything like me and you cannot stand the stupid CAPTCHA things, you might want to email me directly. That's at info@joerooz.com. That's info@joerooz.com. Love to hear from you. Another great idea, by the way, novel idea, is if you leave a comment down below. The comment section is open here on Rumble and, of course, on YouTube. So why don't you leave us a comment and let us know what you're thinking. Love to hear from you guys. Also, please don't forget that this is a live show. So, of course, when we have issues and problems, we try to deal with it in live time. So you're right there with us as we go through it. So again, live show, weeknights, 7 p.m. Central Time, 8 p.m. Eastern Time. And our every other Saturday show with our resident crypto psychic, Marissa Lee, returns on April the 25th. So make sure you are available for that at noon Central Time. And then, of course, we have our Sunday Bible study show every Sunday afternoon at 2 p.m. Central Time. And you can find all of that right here live on Rumble at rumble.com/Joe Rooz. If you want to watch it on YouTube, you can. Still don't know why anybody's watching anything on YouTube. I don't get it. But if you want to, it's youtube.com/@Joe Rooz on there. And you can also check out the live audio. You know, we are part of the Podcast 2.0 platform, and that means that on a lot of the modern podcast apps, the 2.0 podcast apps, you can actually listen to the audio stream live as well. So check that out. The website, you can listen to us live on the website as well. There's a lot of places you catch us, a lot of places you can listen. So please make use of them. We're paying for them. Okay, so please make use of them. All right. Also, don't forget that this is a live show that depends upon the algorithm. What does that mean? You've got to like, subscribe, and share the show with your friends, your family, and your followers. It's the only way we're going to get found. So please do that. Make sure you do that. And honestly, look, if you really want to mess with somebody you don't like, probably the best thing to do is to share the show with them. Send it across their social media. They'll mess up their algorithm for a week. It's fun. I've done it plenty of times. Half of my family won't speak to me now because of it. So it's a lot of fun. All right. So please make sure, seriously though, make sure you like, subscribe, and share the show with your friends, your family, and your followers. Again, to spread the show. We really appreciate that. We are growing, but we are growing slowly, which is fine. But we would love to see more folks getting involved with us here on the show. So please make sure you like, subscribe, and share. All right. Now, tonight's connection is brought to you by Podmatch. Podmatch, Tinder for podcasters. That's exactly what it is. The algorithm, folks. It's all about the algorithm. Tinder, podcasters, it works. So basically what happens is the host builds a profile, the guest builds a profile, the algorithm puts them together, and then you get to match or pass. It's a dating app. It really is. All right? But it's an important one. It really is. Podmatch does fantastic work. Most podcast guests and hosts spend hours researching connections, coordinating interviews, and working on administrative tasks while really only putting about 10% of their time into what really matters, and that's bringing you, the audience, quality podcasts. Podmatch enables the guests and hosts to reclaim that time through automations and streamlined processes so that they can focus on doing exactly what they're intending to do, and that's bringing you, the audience, great shows to really serve the listeners. So if you want to find out more about Podmatch, just click that link. You'll see it right there up on the screen. Podmatch.com/member/Joe. That's podmatch.com/member/Joe. That is the link that takes you right to our profile. And if you like what you see on there, you could sign up to Podmatch right there on our website, and we would love for you to do that. And you never know, you might end up being a guest on this show. It could be fun, could be interesting. So please check it out. Podmatch.com/member/Joe. All right. Well, you know, I forgot to mention something. You might notice something's missing from the back wall here. So we normally have our Texas flag, and we also have our Texas independence flag up here, but a little white fuzzy French bulldog by the name of Charlie decided to pull them down today. Don't know why, don't know how he even got in the studio to do it, but he did. So I'm gonna have to get all that stuff straightened out another time. So sorry about the backdrop. All right. That said, tonight's guest is J. Mark Powell, author of Witness to War, a powerful and deeply unique look at the Civil War told entirely through firsthand letters from the people who lived it. Over decades, Mark collected and studied thousands of original Civil War letters, curating a narrative that captures the war as it unfolded in real time, through the voices of everyday Americans, not just historical figures. His work gives us something rare, a chance to experience history, not as a story that's been told, but as a moment that was actually lived. Mark, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Joe. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
So we have a delay, and so there might be a little bit of a pause here or there. That's because Mark is hiding in his bunker up in the mountains of Nepal, and so we really can't, so there's a little bit of a delay there. Satellites and all that stuff. you believe in that stuff. But there we go.
Actually, I'm broadcasting from Artemis 2 on orbit.
Okay. Oh, so how's the weather up there? I heard it's nice.
It's kind of dark and old, but otherwise fun.
All right. Well, listen, Mark, before we get into the really serious stuff, what's a trend that you're glad disappeared?
Man buns.
Oh, thank you. Oh, yes. I forgot about the...
Remember man buns?
Yes, I remember the man buns.
I used to joke, when they were in vogue, I used to joke that I wanted to run for Congress just so I could pass the Man Bun Elimination Act of 2018, which said that you could go around with like garden shears when you saw one and just lop them off the guy's head without criminal prosecution.
I would support that, sir. I would absolutely support that, 100%.
That's one of those things in the future, Joe. Guys are going to look at their pictures and go, "What was I thinking? What was that all about?"
You would hope they would. You would hope they would. But if you wore a man bun, chances are you're probably still wearing a man bun, and chances are you're probably going to be wearing a man bun when you're in the nursing home, which is going to be really weird. But you never know. You never know. So, what is something that you are better at than most people that you know?
Talking.
And I just noticed something. The delay is gone. That's great. You must be closer.
You could drop a quarter in me and go out to dinner and come back, and I'd still be answering your questions on this podcast while you're gone.
That's because of the delay. There it is again. All right.
I got a feeling it's going to be intermittent all night. So if I seem ponderous, like I'm thinking before I speak, no, it's just time waiting for me to hear. But I think we're going to get through this. I'm optimistic. I'm hoping.
I think so too. I do. I think so too. All right. Last one for you. Last one. What is something simple that people tend to overcomplicate? There's the pondering.
This time I really am pondering. It actually is. There's so many possibilities, from human relationships, romantic relationships. That's the biggie. To computer problems like I'm having tonight.
That's all good. It's all good. Look, I've had worse. Trust me, I've had worse. It's no big deal. We did a show one night, and I don't know if it was. I couldn't tell if it was my internet or their internet, but both of us just looked like blobs of color moving on the screen.
Well, if the video continues in the audio, I could hold up, like in the old silent movies, we could do screen cards,
Yes.
Title pages. By the way, I had a teacher. I'm so old, and this was an old teacher too. But when I was in grade school, I think it was my 5th grade teacher, I remember talking about, she caught the end of silent movies as a kid. Okay. And she would have to read the title cards out loud to her younger sister who couldn't read. And people in the audience kept telling her to be quiet. So, little slice of history there that's long gone.
Which makes no sense.
You don't think about those things,
Yeah, no, it's true. It's very, very true. Very, very true. So, Mark, while we have good stream here, so you spent 25 years in journalism. What originally pulled you into that world?
I'm a gratefully recovered journalist, Joe. That's what I call myself,
okay.
A gratefully recovered journalist. I was a weird kid. I loved to write from day one. When I realized in like 1st, 2nd grade, hey, I can put these stories together in any order I want and write something. It was just within me, the way a musician or an artist is. And then I also fell in love with the social studies, certainly history right off the bat, coming out of the starting gate. And then that bled into politics and geography and all the broader social issues. Those things just fascinated me. So naturally then I was drawn to get into news when I found out, holy cow, I can cover this stuff and get paid for it.
Right.
Shh, don't tell anybody. It's my little scam. What they didn't tell me at the time was you didn't get paid a whole lot. But I had an incredible experience. I like to say, as a reporter, I reported everywhere from the White House to the county courthouse. I met 4 presidents or 5. I've met murderers. I've met everyday heroes. I've met and interviewed on and on and on. It was a wonderful experience. Wonderful experience.
So you mentioned that you were at the White House, Capitol Hill. You worked for CNN, right? Do I have
Yeah, but
that
please
correct?
don't hold that against me. My other habits are good.
That's good. I know people who work for CNBC, so it's it's.
And
no
by
big
the way,
deal.
I like to point out, Joe, I worked for CNN back in the 80s and 90s and O's when they were still doing news, as
Mhm.
opposed to whatever this they're doing. I think they're making it up as they go along.
I
really do.
I agree with you. I do agree with you. So what was the biggest turning point in that journey for you? Working your way all the way up from a local reporter to CNN, covering Capitol Hill, White House, and all that.
I was happy being a senior news writer and a news editor and wanted to stay that way. But corporate America took over. And corporate America, when Ted Turner sold Turner Broadcasting and CNN to Time Warner and AOL and blah, 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 and all the multiple like avalanche of mergers that followed. And it reached the point by the late O's. We never did come up with a name for that decade, did we? Whatever that decade
No.
was, the O's, the aughts.
The aughts.
The rule of thumb, the rule of thumb among the employees at CNN was 20, 50, 100. If you'd been there 20 years or longer, if you were age 50 or older, or if you made 100,000 a year, you were gone. And every year there was a round of playoffs. And towards the end of my time there, and every time you survived one, you moved one notch closer to your turn coming. And what made it sad was if they'd said, "Hey, look, you've had a nice run, but your time's over. There's the door." I got to handle that, and all my friends. But suddenly they did these annual reviews, and suddenly everybody, all these older people, these veterans, these higher paid people, suddenly weren't performing well. And I was like, "Come on, don't do this.
Yeah.
Don't treat it that way."
Yeah. No, I agree with you. I think the way they do things in corporate America at times is absolutely brutal. Absolutely.
It's like being a feudal serf. It really is. It's like being a serf. You're not an employee.
Yeah, I worked in some place, and this is just a sidebar here, but I worked someplace that was corporate America, and they had this very interesting way of terminating people. They wouldn't say anything. They wouldn't let you know. They wouldn't give you a heads up. They would just show up, pack your stuff for you, and then escort you out in front of everybody.
Wow.
No explanations given, nothing to the staff at least.
And we wonder why there's no employee-employer relationship, trustworthiness bond, anything. It's all gone. It's each man for himself. The company looks out for himself. The employee looks out for himself. It's the Wild West. It's a Wild West workforce today.
Absolutely. Absolutely right. So you covered a lot of stories, courthouse to the White House, like you said. What are some of the stories that really stuck with you the most?
I was working in Huntsville, Alabama in the 1980s, and there was a blended family. Mom and dad had each divorced. They each had a child that was 11. They remarry. Nice middle class. This is 1987. Nice ranch-style brick house, And the dad worked overnight at a factory. And in the middle of the night, the boy, who was 11, he hears a sliding glass window break. He hears someone comes in the house. He terrified, he crawls under the bed. Someone goes in, shoots the stepmother point blank in the head, kills her, goes in the bedroom, shoots the point blank 11-year-old stepsister. He waits till they're gone, runs to tell mom and dad, runs to his grandparents who lived a few blocks away, wake them up. Well, you got a double murder in a small southern town, you got a big story, right? Sure. And so the police have a news conference the next day, and it's late, and we've got to get back because in TV you have to have time to edit and put it together, right? And I want to do one more interview I want to swing by the house and get one more shot. Remember the yellow crime scene, do not enter tape they put around, right? I want to get one more shot of that. It's getting late in the afternoon. We're gonna have to really hustle to do this. And as we go by, the grandparents have brought the boy with the police to get belongings out of the house, get clothes and stuff. Mm-hmm. So we said, "Hey, you want to talk?" And they asked the kid, and the kid says, "Yeah." Okay. So we're interviewing him, and it's this whole story of he's telling what I just told you, and I just wanted to hug this kid. I felt so put my arms around him, right? 2 days later, the kid broke. Nobody broke into the house. He hated the mother and stepfather. He shot and killed them both. He broke the window to make it look, Wow. I was talking to an 11-year-old double murderer, Joe, and he had me hook, line, and sinker. I fell for it.
Sociopath, huh?
And I've never trusted another human since. That was quite an experience.
I wouldn't trust an 11-year-old either. But yeah, no, I understand though. That's
with all due respect. Don't trust you. Don't trust the viewers. Don't trust my family. Don't trust anybody.
That's all right. That's fine. That's fine. See, the good thing is that we have quite distance between us here and cameras and stuff, so I don't trust you either. It's okay.
And a time zone.
And a voice delay. So so when did your interest in the Civil War? Well, you have to. You can't take this stuff too seriously. You take it too seriously, you lose your mind. You go crazy. So when did your interest in the Civil War start? Was that something from childhood, or was that something that you kind of grew up into later on?
No, it grew up in childhood. It was early 1970. I lived in the town of Joplin, Missouri. And yes, those of us who come from the Show Me State, we say Missouri and Missouri both. We hear it interchangeably. It's no big deal to us. I grew up in a Missouri household. One Saturday or Sunday afternoon in early 1970, when I was 9, my dad took the family on a day trip to Pea Ridge National Military Park in northwest Arkansas, not far from Bentonville, which is the corporate headquarters of a little company called Walmart. And it really was a little company in 1970. But anyway, it's a beautiful, beautiful national park. And I fell in love, heart and soul, with the Civil War on that spot. It's been my passion ever since. I went home and, of course, started immersing myself with it, self-taught. My parents looked at me and asked one another, did we bring the wrong baby home from the hospital? And kids don't do this. They follow sports. They follow sports stars. He's learning and reciting generals. But something just in here clicked, and it just touched me in a way. And that's not uncommon among a lot of Civil War enthusiasts. Somehow going to, particularly at that age, at age 9, I understood, Joe, that something important and significant had happened where I was. I mean, I got it. I connected with them. Sure. And from then on, and then in high school, as I got older, I started doing Civil War reenacting when I was 15, with the uniforms and the tents.
That's neat. I like that. Yeah.
And about the same time, ironically, I had your typical afternoon. I'm not from a rich family. I'm not a Nepo baby. I'm not a trust fund baby. And I had your typical afternoon job, which we're talking about the middle of the 1970s here, for $1 an hour. That was minimum wage at that time. Even then, photographs, you've probably seen them on the little cardboard, the little historic pictures about this big, not quite the same size as baseball cards, but similar. CDVs, they're called carte de visites. And pictures of soldiers were already becoming collectible and valuable, but pictures of civilians of that era, you could get for like $0.25. And so I started collecting all of them I could. I've now got about 6,200 in my collection, almost all civilian. But that stirred in me, those experiences, reenacting and reading and looking at their pictures, stirred in me a desire to know, what was it like for the average everyday man and woman, whether they were in the army, whether they were civilian, whether they were a man, whether they were children, whether they were white or black or indifferent. Just what was it like? We can't ask anybody. The people who lived through it are all gone. Their children are all gone. There may be a handful of grandchildren, Joe, out of a nation of 330 million people, a handful, and they're in their 90s and 100. So we can't find out. But what we can do is we can learn about it through their letters, because the letters were private. They never thought anybody would ever read them. When you are reading them, you're literally peeping over their shoulder as they're writing. And so being a writer and connecting to people through their words, starting in the 1980s, I started buying a letter here and there when I could. And one day in 2014, and I remember this like it was yesterday, a letter that I'd purchased online was delivered to the post office, and I had to go and sign for it or something. So I go to the post office, I'm driving home, and I'm telling you, I can still remember with my hands on the steering wheel, it occurred to me that this newest letter I just acquired, the content directly connected to another letter I already had. And I really, truly had an epiphany at that moment. What if I could assemble a collection where you could tell the entire story of the war and follow the arc and sweep of the whole thing from Lincoln's election in 1860 till the guys come home in the summer of 1865. Mm-hmm. And so I set about, that was my goal, collecting, building, curating a collection that did actually that, put together an outline. And decades later and more money than I'd wish to say, here we are. And so once I had it, then the book was the next logical step. And, you know, Joe, when you say the word letters, that's a big snooze to a lot of people. I don't know if you've ever read Civil War letters from the period. I counted up, and I have read between 25 and 30,000 now that I've read. And, you know, they're letters like everybody else. If you're writing a letter to your family, hey, mom, hey, wife, how's the kids? How's the crops? How's the cow? Here's what's going on in camp. Joe has dysentery. Send me some stuff. I'd like this. And there's 2 or 3 paragraphs in there that are meaningful to us in the 21st century. The rest of it is just, you know, irrelevant to us.
Right.
So what I did was I stripped away, and this is where being a former journalist helped. I looked for the quote, the soundbite, the memorable moment in the letter. And I just took that passage and then put it together in this collection. That does a couple of things. It keeps the action moving fast. Many readers are telling me this is a fast book. They blow through it. It also enabled me to we have 432 different people in this book. Think about that for a minute. That's an amazing variety of people, you know, to hear from. I like to say 432 people, one amazing story that they tell.
Yeah.
So that's a little bit about how it got going.
Yeah, I read some of the book. I haven't been able to get through the whole thing, to be quite honest with you. Just time was my enemy. But what I have been able to read through it, it does move very fast. It really does. Now I've read books, historical books, from our founding generation, where they would incorporate letters to support the narrative, the story they were telling. And sometimes it was like trudging through, you know, quicksand just to get through it a little bit. But I didn't get that sense from what I was able to read of the book that you wrote. So I agree with that 100%. And it does move very fast, and it's fascinating. I always like that stuff. Like I have a collection of letters, not originals, obviously. I have copies of letters from the founding generation, Washington's letters and John Adams and Thomas Jefferson's letters, and they are absolutely fascinating to read in detail. Like I don't know, maybe I'm just weird, I don't know, but I don't mind reading about the cow and the barn and this and that. I don't mind, or the legal practice and how are things going at home and how come you don't have it, you know, I don't have any more coffee. What am I going to do for coffee now? You know, I don't mind that stuff because that gives me an insight into their life and to the things that were really important to them, in addition to the things that they were doing for the greater good, for the country itself. And it's the same thing with letters from the Civil War era. I think it's incredibly important to know who these people are, because these weren't the people that you're talking about in your book. They're not famous historical figures that everybody knows. This is the average everyday person. So those historical figures that we all know of, you know, they have a kind of a different bent. They have a different view on things. So, you know, they're more in tune. These are just average everyday people trying to make sense of what's going on and why they're there and what they're doing. And they're also very human. And I think that's incredibly important. That comes through in what I was able to actually read of your book.
You know, that's a very important point, Joe. There are no famous voices in this book at all. And I did that intentionally because their books and their letters have been published for years. You know, you can find what they're thinking. There are no presidents There are no famous generals. There's no famous senators. No famous figures of any stripe. No major abolitionists. No major secessionists. I wanted to know what everyday real, the middle class, typical people like you and me. I guess I assume you're middle class. You seem middle class. I'm middle class. I'm not ashamed of it. I'm proud of it. But that's what I wanted. And first of all, a couple of things. These people never, ever, ever, it never entered their wildest dreams that people would one day be reading these letters.
Right.
So they opened up their heart and they poured it out, what they're thinking and feeling. And it's in the moment, it's live. And meaning now these letters are in a book, meaning when I die, I pass through the pearly gates, I'm going to have 432 people standing there with their arms folded across their chest saying, we've been waiting to have a word with you, mister. But there's also an in-the-moment immediacy that you can't get elsewhere. And
That's
when
right.
I say, by the way, there's a lot of little bits of color, not just major things they're talking about, but there is fun little things that I do throw in for tidbits to make them flesh them out as they're real people. By the way, this is the first time all of these, there's more than 500 excerpts. This is the first time they've ever been published, ever been in print. So this is all brand new stuff. A lot of times using quotes and lines from letters in Civil War books has been very common. It's been done quite a bit. All too often, historians have used the same quotes from the same people over and over and over. This is fresh. The length of quotes varies. Sometimes there's a woman named Sarah Montfort who was in the town of Gettysburg as the battle happened. And Civil War history, there's not a lot of what we'd call urban warfare today. It was usually fought in the countryside outside of town. But in Gettysburg, the battle the first day swept through town, and and so suddenly they were behind enemy lines for 2 days. There's like she writes this like 7-page long letter, and it's just incredible. So that excerpt is almost the entire letter. Okay.
Wow.
There's another letter. The shortest excerpt is 1 sentence long. From a businessman in Philadelphia is writing to a friend of his in New York in November 1863. And he says, unfortunately, I'm too busy. Things are too pressing, and I'm unable to leave to go to Gettysburg on Thursday. Going to Gettysburg on Thursday was the dedication of the cemetery, and he blew that off and thus missed hearing Lincoln deliver the Gettysburg Address.
Wow. Well, that's something you can tell. That's something you can let him. You can poke fun at him when you get to the pearly gates, there, buddy.
Yeah. So again, it's not so. It's just depending on the how much of the content it merits. Right. Some are short, some are long, some are in between. It's not all the same. And there's a lot of personal stuff going on to flesh out. These are real people that you can relate to as a person.
Yeah. And that's important. Just for me in particular, I love that. Again, it's not the well-known historical figure that you're hearing this from. You're hearing this from the average everyday person, like you said, that is seeing this thing and not maybe fully understanding why this is going on, because in those days you didn't have CNN, you didn't have Fox News and all these other news agencies, instant broadcasting, every minute of everything. Like you see what's going on right now with this thing with Iran. Every move is broadcast all around the world instantly. Every little thing that happens. That didn't take place in the Civil War period. It took weeks sometimes to get information from one side to the other, and so. That's why, to me, it's so important to read these things, and because these folks really, a lot of them didn't understand why exactly are we fighting, why exactly is this happening, because that information wasn't readily available to everybody.
Yeah, there had, first of all, there had never been a war of this size, of this magnitude in American history. That alone was mind blowing. You got to put yourself in the mindset of these people in 1861, 62 as the war starting. Okay, this war involves 1/3 to a quarter to 1/3 of a continent. It's massive, right? It's costly. By 1865, the war is costing the North $1 million a day, and those are 1860. That's $37 million a day. Okay. And the technology has changed. How you fight wars changed. The casualties The casualties are extraordinary. Today, April 7th, is the 164th anniversary of the second day of the Battle of Shiloh, Tennessee. It was 2 days long.
Mm-hmm.
There had never been a battle when it was fought with that horrific casualties in American history. Shiloh was the one where everybody north and south went, oh my God, what have we got ourselves into?
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's when they realized this war, Joe, was like slit an artery and bleeding for 4 years. Wow. And the latest research, the more people keep digging into it, it was, the casualties were probably even worse than reported at the time. Probably 700,000 to 750,000 dead. That's out of a nation of just under. So almost every home is touched by this war one way or the other in some way.
Mm-hmm. So what makes a letter historically valuable versus just interesting?
Has Artemis II lost transmission?
Artemis II is frozen at the moment, yes.
Okay.
I don't know if you heard the question, though.
How about now?
I hear you.
No, I did not hear the question.
Okay, the question was, what makes a letter historically valuable versus just interesting?
It's the content of what they're talking about. Mm-hmm. You know, I have a bunch of letters that are just from the Civil War, but they don't really say anything that are interesting of us of the 21st century. But when they talk about seeing Lincoln or Robert E. Lee in person and describing them, if they're describing a major battle, hey, we just had a big battle, let me tell you about it. If they're talking about what they're going through, if they're talking about their relationships, there's a letter in the woman from there's a letter in the book from a woman, young wife in her 20s, writing to her husband. She's like 20 or 21. They've got a 1-year-old baby, and she's begging him to desert and come home. And she's not only begging him to desert, she said, I've talked to your parents and they're cool with it. She doesn't say cool, but that's what she said. She's talking about, and here's how you can do it. I'll mail you a box of civilian clothes and you can slip away and put, I mean, she's really, and she said, oh, Joe, if you knew how bad I felt, I know you'd desert and come home. Think about getting that letter. By the way, the guy did not desert. He didn't do it. But it's things that put you in the war weariness. By 1863, 64, they're sick of it, both sides. Mm-hmm. And they don't know, they want it to be over, but they don't know what the exit ramp is. So they keep on fighting. There's a letter from a Confederate soldier who says, I want this war to end and I don't care much how it terminates. He just wants to be done. Yeah. And you watch, there's this explosion of patriotic fervor on both sides, North and South, at the beginning. Then, like I said, they get into it and they go, oh my gosh, what have we done? And then they're just so sick of dying. They're so sick of the dying. They want it to be over. They don't know how, so they see it through to the end. And then there's this just incredible, everything happens in 1865. The war ends, slavery ends, Lincoln's life ends. It all just boom, happens.
Like almost like comes to a crashing halt.
Yeah, it really does. And it happens fast. They're all surprised by it. There's a letter in the book written in April 1865 that says, and a lot of it happened on Sundays. He said, 4 weeks ago, we were astonished when Lincoln, 4 weeks ago, we were all astonished when Richmond fell. 3 weeks ago, we were astonished when Lee surrendered. 4 weeks ago, we were astonished when Lincoln was killed. And now this, it was happening so fast. It was, I write in the book, it was like a chain of firecrackers going off, boom, boom, boom. Each one of these were major historical events. Remember, when Lincoln's killed, it's the first time a president's ever been assassinated. So that was a new experience for them to navigate. Yeah,
well, you don't think about it like that either. There were a lot of firsts that took place during that period of time.
You don't. We know how the story ends in 2026, okay? When they're in the moment, they don't know, particularly at the beginning in 1861 when the country's falling apart at the seams. And by the way, one reader told me, he said, reading about that in 1861 at what's called the secession crisis, as the country is splitting apart, he said, it felt disturbingly like reading social media in 2026 and what's going on in our country in some ways.
Yeah.
And several readers made similar comments.
Yeah, actually, I would agree with that. I really would. And well, that's another conversation for another day. I have very strong opinions on it. So, now as a journalist, you're trained to verify your sources. So how do you apply that to documents that are over 150 years old?
You learn what's, like any form of collecting, you learn what's authentic, what's inauthentic. You learn then to fact check. So you check, did this guy really serve in this regiment? What's his story? Just do a little verification like that, you know.
Where would you find records like that?
Fortunately, most of them are online now. You know, I mentioned getting into reenacting in the 1970s, in the 1980s. Historical research was, you had to physically go to a library. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
You had to hope the book you wanted was in and hadn't been checked out. You know,
Right.
Sometimes you had to drive physically to a library in another state because they had an unusual out of print book that you needed. And today it's all online. It's fascinating. And, you know, I get this letter and I jump on and I start researching, and the wealth of information. There's a wonderful letter written by a 15-year-old girl named Clementine something or other. Her dad was an immigrant from England. They moved to, I think, maybe Brooklyn or somewhere, and then Long Island somewhere. And he had some sort of company, and he did pretty good. They weren't rich, but they were comfortable, right? So in the summer of 1862, Dad decides to take the family back to England, both partly on business and partly for a pleasure to see the relatives over there. So right. Clementine goes. She has a brother who's 17 or 18, and for some reason he stays at home. So she's writing him this wonderful letter, and she says they traveled on a ship called the Eastern Star. So I'd never heard of the Eastern Star. Well, it turned out it was a luxury liner of its day. It could hold like 3,000 passengers. It was huge. Wow. Yeah, exactly. And this was going in style. This was first class. And she said one night on the trip over, the captain throws a dinner and hosts a dinner and a dance in the dining saloon. Okay, so they have dinner at 8 and they move it out, and then they have dancing until 2 a.m. Well, this British captain, it was a British ship, tries to be nice, so he puts the American flag. He hangs the American flag on the wall. Well, the Southerners on board pitch a fit and refuse to go in unless he takes it down and put up a Confederate flag. And then she's describing the standoff, and she said they got drunk and began to yell like wild Indians, and the captain had to go to them 3 times, and we were worried there was going to be trouble, you know. Mm. But apparently nothing happened, and she moves on, right? So I get this letter, and I'm thinking, oh, this is a nice bit of color explaining that tensions, even in traveling, when the two sides were together, could be tense, right? Then I jump online and I start reading about the Eastern Star and what a big deal it was. And it was apparently involved in helping lay the first transatlantic cable, and it was, you know, state of the art. And so all that stuff's there. All you got to do is look for it.
That's interesting. And you don't think, you know, you don't think they would have ships like that size, 3,000 people, you know, luxury liners, you know, quote unquote luxury liners back in the 1860s. But that's fascinating, and I could actually, as you're telling the story, I could actually picture it in my head, the scene in the dining room, in the dining saloon, you know, with all of that commotion going on.
There are moments, Joe, where they have humor, right? Mm-hmm. One young Union soldier writes and says at the end of the last part of the last thing he writes before closing is, "Write as soon as you get this, and if you don't get this, write soon anyway." Another young soldier, the kid lied about his age. He was 16 and lied and said he was 18. Mm-hmm. And he is writing after the Battle of Antietam, and he's writing to his aunt. And he said, so-and-so in our regiment got a letter saying that from his parents saying they heard I was killed in the battle, but it's the first I've heard about being dead. So, you know, they had some fun and have their sense of humor. There's stuff that just breaks your heart, your heart. There's stuff that's just unbelievable. They hated witnessing executions, both sides, soldiers. They had to kill so many people that seeing somebody intentionally killed, even if they felt, yeah, they deserve it. They just didn't want to see him hanged. They didn't want to see him executed. There was a letter I got that I was like, oh my gosh, I've got to get this letter because this is just an incredible experience. It turned out then through doing online research, it was the most botched execution in the entire Army of the Potomac of the Civil War.
I think I know the one you're talking about.
Yeah, two guys have been tried. They've been caught deserting, and they'd been deserting before, right? So they order this whole division, like 10,000 guys in this big open field to line up and watch it. Well, it had rained the night before. And the guys in the firing squad, the powder was dry. So they have this big thing and they play the death march and he's describing it. They bring them all in and they sit them down on their coffins and they blindfold them. But the powder was bad. So they have to keep refiring. And sometimes they're hitting them and sometimes they're not. 10 times they have to shoot these guys. Can you imagine going through that? And he says one time he said one of the guys was so miserable, he jumped up and took off his blindfold and begged for a gun so he could shoot himself just to get it over with.
Oh my gosh.
Think about that for a minute.
Yeah.
There is a description of a hospital in the summer of 1864 in Washington. So this isn't, I'm not talking about a field hospital near the battlefront. They've been removed back into Washington. And she said, it's July, it's August, so it's hot. And she said, we have to keep the windows open and the men's bodies are covered in flies and they're too weak to shoo them away. You know, think about that for a minute. There's another incredible experience outside Petersburg, Virginia, where a guy's writing and he said a guy was a shell hit a hospital, right? And a doctor was doing an amputation and the guy on the table was killed and the doctor lost his leg and had to be amputated.
Oh, wow.
Weird. There's another thing where, you know, then as now, when a loved one fell, bringing their body back to the family cemetery to be buried with the family was a really big deal. Young Union soldier, 1819-20, is killed in the Battle of Fort Donelson, Tennessee in February 62. His sister is then writing to their mutual sister, who's like in New York State. Well, when you wanted the body, you had to go get the body. And when I say get the body, you had to get a shovel. Okay. And these guys these were battlefield deaths. They weren't in caskets. They weren't embalmed. Right. And her husband had to go down and she describes what it was like and what condition the body was in. And it just really it's morbid, but it also lets you feel like what it was like, the trouble he had to go to. He's identifying his dead brother-in-law and he'd been dead for 6 weeks. It wasn't a pleasant experience. Sure. But again, that's what it's like to be there in the moment.
Do you think, I don't know, because they're so detailed in their writings. Sometimes you wonder if they were actually, maybe in the back of their mind, they had posterity in mind as they were writing these things, at least in the family side of it.
We do know they were pack rats. The mid-Victorians, the people, the Civil War is called the mid-Victorians were pack rats. They saved everything. Mm-hmm. But they were very much aware that they were living through a real big deal in American history. They knew, however this thing turned out, this was, and so consequently, they were motivated to save that too. Sometimes it's real interesting. You mentioned that, Joe. Sometimes these guys would number their letters, right? At the top, they write number 14, number 28, number 36, right? They did that for two reasons. Now, this wasn't common, but it wasn't rare when you see it either. They did that for two reasons: to make sure that in case something happened and a letter didn't get home, right? And they would say when they replied, I got your number 17 and then number 19. I don't know what happened to number 18, right? And then also to help them after the war. And several times they're saying, I'm sending stuff home. I want you to save this. I want you to keep it, you know. Another interesting thing, and you mentioned, you touched on this earlier, pardon me, when guys would, what's going on instantaneously, right? Mm-hmm. After major battles, they would write and say, hey, we just had a big battle at this place called Gettysburg. But you see this all the time. They say, but you probably know more about it from reading the papers than we do. Because these battles were huge. And they took place over several miles. And you know what happened to you and your regiment, but you don't know the whole picture.
Right.
You know?
Right.
And so they're telling them their experience, but they can't say the whole thing. And soldiers soldier, and by the way, soldiers, this is several letters in the book, soldiers write, what are folks back home saying about the war? They're asking, what are folks saying about the war? Not just the military advantages and ebbs and flows. What they're really asking is my sacrifice worth it? You know, do people respect what I'm doing and what I'm going through? Do they feel it's worthwhile? That's what they're really getting at with that question.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. I mean,
but and people in the Army and people in the Army and at the home front, they're trying to understand it as it's happening. They're trying to make sense of it all, you know, because this is a big sprawling war, all the way from Rio Grande and from what's now New Mexico to there was a skirmish in Vermont. Confederate raiders crossed the border at St. Albans, Vermont, and thousands and tens of thousands of places in between.
And it was a brutal war. It was absolutely brutal from everything that I've read about it and studied. It was unlike anything that we've ever seen up to that point.
Yeah, it was. Yeah. There's a really wonderful letter. A guy has just come through the Battle of Gettysburg, so he's seen some heavy duty stuff. And the North started drafting in 1863, the first national military draft ever. And if you were drafted, you had a couple of options. You could, of course, go, or you could hire a substitute to take your place and show up for you. Or you could pay a $300,000 fee, which would be about $11,000 or $12,000 today, right? And essentially get out of jail free and buy your way out. Okay? Yeah. So this soldier is from Vermont, and his brother is 18, and apparently a neighbor had offered him $300 to take his place if he's drafted. And so he's writing to the big brother in the Army and saying, what should I do? What do you think, right? And he writes at length and he said, $300 might sound like a lot of money to you, but he said, if you were here and have seen and gone through what I've gone through, you would think $1,000 could go to the devil for all you care. And then he starts talking about, I've seen men with their legs cut off. I've seen men who lived a long time and then died. I've seen men who died and never knew what hit them. I've seen and he said, if you've seen here and seen what I've seen, you might think $5,000 could go to the devil. And he makes $5,000 sound like all the money in the world, you know. He said, you might think $5,000 could go to the devil. And he says, $300 don't pay for one battle, you know.
Wow.
There's an interesting exchange between two young lieutenants from, I believe it's Wisconsin. And they're both in the Army, but they're in different regiments. And this friend is writing to his friend in a different regiment. And he says, you know, he said, when I look at the number of battle deaths we've had, and then the number of guys who've died of disease and sickness and illness, right? A military company was 100 men. And he said, I calculate that about 20 men of my company will survive the war. Will I be one of the 20 is the question that occupies my thinking these days, right? And what's interesting then, both the guy who wrote the letter and the recipient, the soldier who received the letter, they both were dead within a year, you know? Oh, wow. And that's one thing too, a lot of people comment on, Joe, in this book. I try to write what happened, and over and over and over. So-and-so was killed 6 months after this later. So-and-so later died in prison, so-and-so. And people go, you know, oh my gosh, it's so sad. Because see, if I tell you about like the Battle of Shiloh I mentioned earlier, and I could say, 8,000 guys were killed and 16,000 were wounded. But when you tell the story of one person, you can connect one-on-one, and you form a kind of relationship, you know. Joseph Stalin, a man not famous for his humanity, Joseph Stalin once said, when one person dies, it's a tragedy. When 1 million people die, it's a statistic. And this brings back that one-on-one connection. You can read and feel what it's like, and you find out, they died. Yeah. Right? These people have been dead 160 years, and it's almost like you find out, they just died right at this moment.
What surprised you the most about how they were actually processing the war while they were living through it?
What surprises me is how they keep going. What surprised me is how they keep going. I mean, you know, if I were in one of these battles were horrible, horrific experiences. Case in point, do you remember the Denzel Washington movie Glory?
Oh yeah, I saw it the
Came
other
out in
day.
1989. It was a big hit. There are the 54th Massachusetts, which African American Black Regiment attacks Fort Wagner outside of Charleston, and I've got a letter from a guy in a different regiment involved in that same attack, though, but it was on the coast. It was on the Atlantic coast, and this guy is wounded. Okay. And he's telling his wife, and he said, and as I was coming back, so he's wounded, he can walk, but he's in a lot of pain. And there was a wounded soldier lying in the water on the beach. And he said, and the tide was coming in. And he said, no, this is the best place to be. And he said, I tried to tell you he's going to drown. He goes, no, it's all right. And there's shells exploding all over. And the last thing he says in his letter to his wife is, I can't wait until I'm all healed and can go back at him again. I don't understand that, Joe. If it had been me, and I'd attacked him, I'd have said, I'm going to rethink that. You guys go on ahead. I'll set this one out.
Yeah.
What keeps them going over and over and over and year after year? It's unbelievable. A lot of things. They really felt, both sides, they were fighting for something deep and meaningful and significant. Also, you didn't want the reputation of being a coward back home. These regiments were raised from the same area. And if you were in like, say, New York City, the same neighborhood in New York, if it was a rural area from the same county or nearby counties, and they would write letters back home. And sometimes those letters would be printed in newspapers, right? So you didn't want to hear, oh, that Joe Rooz, he was really a coward and he turned his back and ran. He deserted, and and people would start talking about it, So, but also there was a feeling that they just had to keep going. It was all they, after a while, knew what to do.
Yeah,
knew what to do.
A little earlier, you made a comment about some of the readers, finding strange. Well, not strange, but just interestingly how some things are mirrored what they're seeing today in this country. For example, in the letters that you're talking about, there's also a lot of divisions, a lot of family splits, a lot of divided communities, so on and so forth. And don't you feel like it's a just to kind of go back to that for a minute? Don't you feel like it's really is kind of uncomfortably familiar with what we're seeing today going on in our country right now?
You said the magic word, Joe, uncomfortable. There's a famous saying, it's attributed to Mark Twain. He didn't say it, but it sounds like something he would say. History doesn't repeat itself, but it often echoes, and it rhymes. There is an uncomfortable similarity. If you go back to the 1860s, you had blue states and gray states. Today we have blue states and red states, and they're pretty much the same. They haven't changed if you look at it broadly speaking, and we're still dealing with progressive liberals, liberal progressives versus conservatives. What they're arguing over is different, but where they are and what they're saying and two different guiding philosophies and approaches, that hasn't changed.
Yeah, that's true. That's very true. I had a Bible teacher used to say all the time, if there's one thing that man doesn't learn from history, is that man doesn't learn from history.
One of my favorite stories is one of my favorite quotes on history is from Harry Truman, who said, the only new thing in life is the history you don't know. And one of my other famous quotes, there was a famous British historian, Sir Thomas Carlyle, and someone once asked him, Sir Thomas, what is history? And he thought for a moment and said, just one damn thing after another.
Yeah, that made me think. Yeah, that's interesting.
And that is history. This war was fought not by guys who are marble statues, but by real people. And they're afraid, they're confused, they have courage, they dig deep within them. Men, women, learners from two slaves, and those are rather rare. Most slave states, by state law, slaves were not allowed to be taught to
Yeah, we're breaking up again. I unfortunately lost most of everything you just
Artemis
said.
2 is not transmitting well.
Yeah, we lost. You're making a good point. You started with a good point. I don't know what happened to it. It just disappeared. But so I'm sorry. Not any fault of your own.
Can you hear me now?
It's the connection. Yes, I got you now. I do.
I feel like remember those old Verizon commercials? Can you hear me now?
Yes. Yeah.
No, but I was trying to say it's and we hear from all these different voices, and it's not just one, and it's not just Union or Confederate, Northern or Southern. It's men, women, children, da 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 da. And I tell people it's like Prego spaghetti sauce. It's in there.
It's another good one. Absolutely. Now you said basically it was the goal wasn't to tell people who was right and who was wrong, but to let the voices speak for themselves. So after spending decades and reading these letters, studying these letters, and then eventually compiling the book, what do you think it all meant?
Joe, I would be a liar if I could tell you, I've studied the Civil War for 55 years, 6 times longer that went on. I don't know. It's bad with math. If I paid attention with math class instead of history, I might be able to do that in my head.
But let's put it this way: you spent my lifetime studying this because I am 55. I'll be 56 this year. So
yeah, and it becomes harder and harder and harder to understand the older I get and the more I go into it. It was the biggest tangled plate of spaghetti you've ever seen in your life, and one of the things that disturbs me is Americans are very impatient people, and they're very impatient with their past. And it's like, okay, I don't want to bother thinking, tell me who's the good guy and who's the bad guy. Who do I root for? Who do I root against?
Yeah.
And this whole, the war was fought over slavery. The war was fought over slaves' rights. It's too cheap and too easy. Mm-hmm. And the problem is the war was fought over slavery and the war wasn't fought over slavery. The war was fought over states' rights and it wasn't fought over states' rights. We could go on through them. And it was like, remember Charles Dickens and A Tale of Two Cities? It was the best of times. It was the worst of times. Well, how can that be? And yet it was. And yes, all these things are causes and they're not causes. And basically, I mentioned in the foreword in the introduction, it was like the North and South were like a couple that had reached a crisis point in their marriage. And they said, look, we've either got to get this thing, we've either got to get this resolved or we're going to go our separate ways, one or the other.
Yeah.
And they went, and that we know what happened.
Yeah. And unfortunately, we're starting to see that rear its ugly head again here.
And, Joe, we talked about, maybe 700,000, 750,000 dead. We don't know what we lost in that war. What if Mark Twain had been killed? What if Thomas Edison had been killed?
Great point.
So we fully don't know what we lost, the lives that were ended short. And most of these guys, in their 20s.
Yeah.
So they had their whole lives ahead of them. So.
Well, if someone's listening right now, wanting to really get started in studying the Civil War, collecting artifacts, Civil War artifacts, what would the first step be that you would recommend for them?
To study or collect, because they're different.
Well, let's take both. So, for someone who wants to start to study and dig deep into the Civil War, what would be the first step? And then you can follow that up with somebody who wants to collect things, artifacts, and memorabilia. Well, I hate the same memorabilia, but you know what I mean.
No, that's memorabilia is a fair word. It's a fair word. First of all, find out what happened and try to find objective sources. Everything today, all aspects of our life, our politics, our history, even our faith sometimes is highly partisanized. Is partisanized a word, or did I just make it up?
You made it up, but that's good. That's fine.
Okay.
We innovate on this show.
It's exciting to be present at the birth of a new word. Everything is so, this is what you must think. This is it. There's only this. There's only that. You can't think anything else, right?
Right.
And by the way, I have no agenda in this book. My goal with this book was to hold a mirror up and let them reveal themselves to us, good, bad, or indifferent. I'm not here. This is not my interpretation of the war. This is them in their own words telling you what they went through. That's very important for me. Okay. Warts and all. And there's some very ugly things in this book too. The N word, my publisher, the editor, and I had a long discussion about that. The N word is in there because if you start cleaning and changing history, where does it end? So you have to leave the warts and all. I don't use that word. I'm 65 years old. If I use that word, my mother would come up out of the grave and spank my bottom till I bled. So I do not condone that word. And by the way, it should be disturbing to people today to see how casually and how frequently that word is read. Getting back to your question, how frequently the word was used, and almost all in northern letters, not southern letters. Here's the thing. First of all, try to find objective, but balanced. Let's just look at these people, right? Sources. Take some time, particularly some of the older authors who are less driven. Is that a code word for saying Marxist or leftist? but try to find some good, find out what happened and just, go back and look at it from that perspective. If you want to start a collection of relics, that's the word instead of memorabilia, relics, right? Start small and go simple. Okay. There are a lot of shysters and con men out there. It's like a counterfeiter. They're not going to make some small little petty thing. They're going to forge a letter from Robert E. Lee or Abraham Lincoln or Ulysses Grant for $25,000. Okay.
Right.
So counterfeiters they don't counterfeit $1 bills. They counterfeit $100 bills. So start slow, learn about it, ask questions. There are a lot of relic shows all around the country, particularly in the Southeast where the war happened, but they're held nationally. Just jump onto Google and do Civil War relic shows and start asking and looking. Find certainly eBay there or find relics dealers, but try to buy from buy small, buy affordable, learn, get to know, get connected, get to know Civil War people in your community, ask questions. A lot of Civil War people are very happy to share their knowledge with people who are interested in it. That's how I learned. I'm indebted to so many people who taught me over the years,
Right.
And then just slowly build it from there.
All right, outstanding. And be careful if someone tries to sell you a Lincoln head penny from 1861. Right?
Yeah. The Lincoln didn't appear on the penny till 1909, so that's your
Right.
first clue.
Yeah, exactly.
Danger, Will Robinson, not good.
There you go. All right. So, Mark, before we wrap up here, so who is someone that you respect right now, and what are they doing that inspires you?
Who? Contemporary?
Anybody. Who is someone that you respect, and what are they doing, or what have they done that inspires you?
Well, just to keep the Civil War flow going, because I've got so many people I respect, and I certainly don't want to get political. I have a friend named Robert Sirio who lives in Neosho, Missouri, which is a small county seat town you probably never heard of because you have no reason to hear of it. He's a master craftsman who hand makes Civil War leather products, reproduces.
Oh, wow.
His boots and shoes and leather goods are in museums, and he makes it all by hand. I mean, the way they did. And he's meticulously authentic. And so I respect his dedication to that craftsmanship and keeping that tradition alive.
We need more people like that.
Yeah, we do. In
Absolutely.
all areas.
Absolutely. So where can people go to find out more about you, your book, social media, sir?
If you want to learn about me, you can go to jmarkpowell.com. Now, my name's down there on the screen, but it's jmarkpowell, altogether, no period, jmarkpowell.com. If you want to buy the book, my heavens, Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, Walmart.com. You can order it on Walmart.com. It's everywhere under the sun. Witness to War, the story of the Civil War told by those who lived it. If you buy it on Amazon, there is a Kindle version available. Otherwise, it's in softback.
All right. Well, what if we wanted a signed copy? How do we get that?
Come down to South Carolina. Message me on I've had some people, they send it to me, I sign it, and I mail it back to them. So you can contact me. My email address is on the website, jmarkpowell.com.
Outstanding.
I'll come anything for a sale, Joe. I'll mow your yard. I'll paint your house. Anything you need.
All right. You got it. No problem. I'm going to need a landscaper soon. My landscaper's leaving in October. So anyway. So Mark, thank you. This was great. I really enjoyed this conversation. This was fantastic. And so I'm going to put you backstage if you want to just hang out until I wrap up the rest of the show, and then I'll connect with you there again. And we'll kind of close things out between the two of us. All right. Artemis is passing the moon now. All right, Mark. I'll see you backstage. All right, then, folks. J. Mark Powell. Make sure you check out his book. Look, I have a PDF copy of it that he was gracious enough to send, and I appreciated that. I did read some of it, and what I did read of it, I being totally honest with you, it is a great read. It really is. So please check it out. If the Civil War is your thing, and this is something that you would find really interesting, and I think you would, I think anybody would, check it out. Please do that. I think we could all learn something very valuable from what he has collected over the years and studied and put so much of his time and life into. So please make sure you check out the book. All right. You know what, folks? It is that time of year. It is coming up. It's that very important time of year when you need to make sure that you are on the good list and not the naughty list. You know what I'm talking about? Well, April 15th is coming. Liberal Christmas. That's right. And you want to make sure that you're on the nice list, you're not on the naughty list, so get your taxes done and get them done quickly. Now, out here in Eagle Pass, we have a great little company here, a little local business called Diamond Dynasty Tax Group Legacy. All right, you can give them a call at 830-867-7106. Now, you don't have to live in Eagle Pass for them to help you. You can use them anywhere within the state of Texas, and they will be more than happy to work with you on these things. When I started using them, it was when I first purchased the asylum, and I had all the receipts from all the renovations and the building the studio and all that stuff. It was literally a folder about that big. And they took all of that stuff, they whittled it all down, and they got me a great return on the investment, and they minimized all the stress involved with it. And they just did it for me again, just a couple of weeks ago. They did my taxes for me again, did a fantastic job with them, really, really happy with the service. So give them a call at 830-867-7106. It's 830-867-7106. Make sure you ask for Esme. She's the one who helps me, and she does a fantastic job. All right, so check them out, Diamond Dynasty Tax Group Legacy. All right, shout-outs, of course, to our executive producing team, executive producers Wayne Rankin, Rosanna Rankin, Carolina Jimenez, Marissa Lee, and, of course, the inestimable Anonymous Angela. Thank you guys for all the work that you put into putting these shows together. I really do appreciate it. And, folks, we follow what we call the value for value model, very simply. If you are receiving any value from the content we're putting out, we're asking you return that value to us in the form of a donation. That donation could be the 3 T's, your time, your talent, or your treasure. And these folks donate their time, their talent, or their treasure. And they help us put these shows together. They help us with the bookings. They help us with everything, every aspect of it. And we greatly appreciate that. Now, if you want to find out more about how you can help out the show, you can very easily go to the website, go to joerooz.com/support, joerooz.com/support, and you can find out all the different ways that you can help us out. And believe me, it would be greatly, greatly appreciated. Putting together these shows is not exactly the cheap thing to do. So if you can help us out, we would really appreciate that. All right. Well, we spend a lot of time in this country arguing about history. Who was right? Who was wrong? What it all meant. But tonight, at least for me, reminded us of something different. The people living through it didn't have that clarity. They weren't looking back. They were living forward. They were living in uncertainty, in fear, and in conviction. And you know what? Maybe that's a lesson for us. Because when a nation gets divided enough, everyone thinks they're right. Everyone believes that their cause is what's justified. And yet when it's all over, someone is left asking the question, what did it all mean? The real question is, are we any better at answering that today than we were back then? Just something for you to think about. All right, folks, I think that will just about do it for us for tonight. So please don't forget to check out the website, joerooz.com. Leave us a message. Let us know what you think. Any questions, comments, cares, or concerns that you might have. And if you want to help us out, check out the support page. We would really, really appreciate that. Really appreciate you guys being here with us tonight. Tomorrow night, Joseph M. Leonard with us at 7 p.m. Central Time, so we look forward to seeing you there. All right, folks, listen, make Texas independent again. Go podcasting. Keep a steady stride. And more important, keep talking. We will see you tomorrow night. Good night, folks.